Welcome to the Idea Land podcast, hosted by Ravi Kamati Reddy. Rob Pallante is a former NCAA Division I and pro hockey player, a successful executive who narrowly escaped death after a life-threatening injury. Supercharged with a newfound purpose, he now uses his experience to teach mental fitness to high-performance athletes both on and off the field.
Welcome to the Idea Land podcast, Rob. It's so awesome to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I am doing actually better than pretty good. It's been a busy day. I like when my days are busy. I'm just west of Toronto up in Canada. So when the sun is shining and the temperatures are on the plus side, that's a good day.
You know, what you're doing is amazing. So the mindset coaching and the results you seem to be getting, the results for yourself and the people you're helping are awesome. But there's something else with this. With you specifically, it seemed like you've lived like 3 different lives. And I wanted to understand how you got to what you're doing now. And if you could describe your journey, because that's what seems so inspiring to me, and I think will inspire other people as well.
No, I appreciate that. And I think 3 is being modest. It's probably more like 8 or 9 lives. And
Let's go through them.
Fortunate to still be here. So I grew up just outside of Toronto in a little area called Mississauga. It's not so little anymore. It's actually one of the largest suburbs just west of the city. Being a Canadian kid, was obviously intrigued by hockey. My father was an athlete growing up. He played hockey, he played football. He had an opportunity to potentially try out for the Canadian track team. So not bad for a first generation Italian growing up in the city, right?
Did your dad have something to prove or what? He's just, I'm going to go all out.
No, this is what I had to deal with, right? So my dad was multi-talented athlete and successful corporate business person. But he always instilled that kind of faith into both myself, and I have a younger brother, 2 years younger. So we were always involved in sports. And I took to hockey, my brother took to hockey, and we excelled at the sport. I played at the highest levels of minor hockey in the city. I had an opportunity to play junior hockey, which afforded me the opportunity to get a scholarship. I went down to Michigan Tech on a Division I hockey scholarship. And so this is where part of my story starts to dissect a little bit, because I had always been, quote unquote, the guy coming out of the city, being one of the most valuable players on the team. And in my mind, I was projected right to the NHL.
Did you have a doubt?
There was never a doubt in my mind that I wasn't going to play in the NHL.
Can I just take a second to pause on that little journey? Because you went through that really quickly like it was no big deal, even though when you think about it, Canada's like a hockey machine. It churns out incredible players. So I'm just going to assume that going through that process means there's a ton of other people who you're better than. How did you do that?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's one that I get the opportunity to explore with young athletes now. I think if I'm able to use hindsight as 2020, I was able to, at that point, that's all I wanted to do as a kid. Different than today. Like, I'm 51 years old. So, I didn't have a cell phone until I was 25. We didn't play video games growing up. My kids asked me today, well, what did you do? I said, well, we went outside, and that's what we did, right? And so I loved the game of hockey. I just loved it. And being a Canadian kid and growing up in the suburbs, at the time, the area wasn't fully mature. So we had outdoor rinks that were just frozen areas of water that were around the house. So that's where we would go. And parents would drag their hoses out from their backyards, and they would make sure that they were flooded at night and ready to go for us in the morning. So you really learn to just play the game. And my father was a big influence, and having him sort of guide me through my minor hockey career, I had coaches, and then I had my dad, right? And he was never the typical hockey parent. Yeah, screaming in the stands. If you ever heard his voice, it was usually for one reason. It was because he didn't think you were giving an effort. And so take skill out of it, take all of the other tangibles out of it. His biggest thing was go out and give your best. Don't worry about mistakes. And so I had that as my upbringing as a young athlete. So I wasn't worried about the mistakes. And I just knew that as long as I went out and I tried hard, I was going to get better. And I could see that I was just as good or better than most of the kids. I was a good skater. I handled the puck well. In my early years, I was just as big, if not bigger, than most of the kids. That changed at about 14 because I hadn't gone through my growth spurt yet. So it was my first taste of adversity where I was playing at a AAA level of minor hockey. I got to 14. I had been the captain and assistant captain on one of the best teams in the city for 4 years. And I got cut going into a very crucial year. They call it, I guess it's called U14 right now, but it used to be called Bantam. And that's really where the scouts and people start to take a look at you at about 14 years old, if you're not a prodigy. And I played with some prodigies. I played with some guys that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame now that came out of that era. But I knew that I was talented enough to keep playing. And so that just kept me focused on going to the next level and the next level. And it almost got to the point where I just expected I was going to go to the next level because of the progress I was making. And I got drafted to junior at a very high in the 3rd round. Probably should have went a little bit higher, but the way it works in Canada, even in the US, you have to make a decision to play major junior A, which is considered quasi-professional, or you have to wait another year until you can get an offer to play NCAA hockey. And because they offset, you have to make a decision whether you're going to attend camp or not. And if you go to a junior camp for more than 48 hours, you forfeit your eligibility to play at a school. So I got drafted by a team way up in Northern Ontario, and they weren't very good. And I promised my father if I wasn't drafted by a team closer by that was a contender, I would play a year of what was called Junior B and see what scholarship offers. So I did that, and I got offered 5 or 6 different scholarships, and I wind up choosing to go to a school that my father was an alumni at. So he had gone to Michigan Tech also. He played there, won the very first NCAA championship, and he held a record for most points by a freshman defenseman. So again, I'm just living in his shoes.
Did you feel like that at the time when you were doing that, or was it just like you liked the praise?
The challenge. I'm like, yeah, I'm going after it. You know, Dad, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to beat your records. And
did you?
Woulda, coulda, shoulda. You know, I don't know if you can swear on your podcast or not.
Yeah. I don't trust people don't swear, so don't worry.
I have a saying, you know, if the queen had balls, she'd be king, right? So I went to Michigan Tech, and I found myself, I was on campus. I was a true freshman, just coming up on my 18th birthday, excited to be there. You know, my head was, swollen that I had gotten a scholarship ahead of guys that were already playing a year or two ahead of me. And here I was, and I was at a school that my dad went to, and I was going to be this legacy, and everything was going to be awesome. Yeah. 3 days on campus, I go to a frat party with some of the other guys from the team. And now I look around, and I'm indulging in some adult beverages and lost track of time. It's coming up on about 2:00 in the morning, and I'm shooting pool with a guy that went on to win a Stanley Cup and play in the NHL, a gentleman by the name of Randy McKay. And so Randy was a senior, I was a freshman, and somebody bumps into him at the pool table. Next thing you know, he's grabbing me. He goes, "Come on, kid, we're going outside." We walk outside, and it's him and I. The rest of the guys on the team are gone. We fight 5 guys in a parking lot. I break my hand.
You're kidding.
Welcome to the NCAA. we had not even started training camp, hadn't even stepped on the ice. So I tried to mask that I had a broken hand for about 3 or 4 days into training camp. And it was only so long I could do it. I had a boxer's fracture in my hand. The bone was going to pop through. I had to go to the hospital and have it taken care of. The truth came out. Boom, Rob's in the doghouse. And so I wind up only playing 6 games my freshman year, and I wind up getting redshirted. And it did not sit well with the coach, as you can imagine.
Were they mad that you didn't tell them up front, or that you got in the situation in the first place?
I think it was a combination of both. And if I look back at my 17, 18-year-old self now, I'd say, hey, you know what? You can never go wrong telling the truth. And whatever happens, you can deal with the consequences. As a kid, you don't know. You think, okay, well, I'm going to try to mask this, and I know I can push through it. I didn't realize how badly my hand was broken. And then when I did go and show the trainers, they were like, you're going to have that reset, maybe surgery. We don't know what happened. Because this didn't happen in the weight room, right? So the truth came out. Right. And, I think being the young player that I wasn't mentally or physically prepared for that type of adversity at that point in my career. right?
That's something I hear athletes say a lot is when they're going through the process of maturing. It's a really hard process because they don't get a lot of choice. It's like this very linear path. They're making very few choices, and everyone else is telling them what to do. And it's like, hey, kid, just do this thing, do it really well, and you're going to be fine. You'll get to this end point. Is that what it felt like?
That's exactly what it felt like, Ravi. And to your point, why I'm doing what I'm doing, if I kind of jump ahead and then I'll come back, but why I'm doing what I'm doing right now is because there was nobody at that time, at that level, to talk to about what was going on up here in my head. And this 6 inches that sits between your brain is the most powerful muscle that we have in our body. And if we don't learn how to train and develop that muscle in so many different ways, then we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to succeed. So at that point now, I'm faced with this adversity. I'm not a regular in the lineup. I come back from my red shirt freshman year, which is supposed to be my sophomore year. I'm in the lineup. I'm out of the lineup. I'm doing all the things that I believe I was supposed to be doing, right? And in typical U.S. college fashion, there's a lot of kids on the team. I would happen to be one that was on a full scholarship. I guess I assumed I should be playing. Coaches thought otherwise. But when I looked around, then I started to do, well, I'm better than him, and I'm better than him. And whether I was or I wasn't, I kept telling myself that I was, right? Mm-hmm. And then when I wasn't in the lineup, because what they would do in hockey was you practice all week, and then they'd post the lineup on Friday morning after our skate, and you come off the ice and you check the lineup to see if you're in the lineup for the weekend.
Yeah.
And if your name's not there, which mine wasn't a lot of times, you played in what we called the afternoon hockey league, which was extra reps on the ice to keep the guys in condition so that when they did go back in, they were ready to go. So, I spent a lot of time in the afternoon hockey league. But I'd go back at night questioning, what was I not doing? Right. And I started to point the finger. I started to feel sorry for myself. And I went into a very dark place. Right. And I can look back on that now, and not having the mental tools to be able to coach myself through it, or having somebody there to talk to about it. Because when I did approach the coaches, what they would say is, Rob, be patient and work hard. Oh, okay. What part of that am I not doing? But that's the most you would get, right? What the hell does that mean? You tell an 18-year-old, be patient and work hard. Okay, coach. But what does that mean, right? And I'm able to know what that is now. I'm able to coach kids through that now. I'm able to help them not step on the landmines that I stepped on. And I think that's all part of life's experiences. There are some young guys that I'm learning have the opportunity or have the mindset to work themselves through that. I wasn't one of those guys. I had all the talent, but I didn't have the mental skills, right? And so now I realize that, talent will get you in the game. Consistency gets you paid.
Yeah, I can relate to that in an academic level. I wasn't an athlete, but didn't really even value it that much like I do now, right? It's very different now because those two things that we separate out, it's stupid that we separate that out as if like we're some machine and the soul exists up here. It's one dynamical system, right? That all works together. It's weird because, the heuristic that worked for you to get you to that point was, hey, tell myself I'm better, believe I'm better, believe in myself, and go do these things. And then you're put in a situation where you're like, that heuristic isn't working anymore. You're like, wait, I'm doing the same thing I did before to get the results. Now those results aren't coming, and now I'm doing this extra work, and now the coach is always annoyed at me. And you're like, someone help me through this, like you said, minefield. I like that analogy. What had to give? I mean, what changed?
Yeah. So at that point, nothing changed. I did not, I just kept pursuing through what I call I lumbered through just what I thought was hard work. And what I come to realize now is that it's not just about the physical work you got to put in, it's the mental work you have to put in. It's the things that you're thinking about and the actions you put behind the things you think about, right? So it's not just saying, I want to be successful, but was I doing the extra work? Was I giving myself the opportunity to be successful? I took the fact that I wasn't playing personally, and I resented the coaches. I hated going to the rink. And as soon as practice was over, I couldn't wait to get off the ice. Those are not things that are going to produce success. but there was nobody there to tell me different, right? And, you think intuitively that, oh, you should know these things, but you don't as an 18, 19-year-old kid who's all of a sudden gone from this trajectory, which is straight up, to a plateau, and now you're on a downslope, and now you're living in this. I was living in this resentment. I'd come back to my dorm or my room at night, and after I moved off campus, and I started to isolate myself from the other guys, because now I started questioning, well, I used to think I was good enough, but maybe I'm not good enough anymore, right? And I had a hard time relating to the other guys that were on scholarship, or Canadians or Americans, and saying, well, are they better than me? And I started to question myself. And that took a toll on me. And I went back for another year. And my junior year, I played every game up until Christmas. Thought this was going to be my breakout year. I started to mature a little bit more physically, and I felt good. I trained hard in the off season, and I came back, and up until Christmas, and then every year at Christmas time, they had what was called the Great Lakes Invitational Tournament. So there was Michigan Tech, University of Michigan, Michigan State, and then there was one other team that would get invited, and we played at what was then Joe Louis Arena. Right, it's the Detroit Little Caesars Arena now, which is way nicer than the one we played in. But it was awesome because you get 17, 18,000 people coming to the games. All the scouts are going to be there. It was an opportunity for me that I thought, this is my opportunity to shine. We get to Detroit, we practice our first skate. I come off the ice, and I'm not in the lineup. And I'm like, okay. Is he playing games with me now? So now my mind starts creeping back into my past, and I'm starting having those emotions that were tied to those events from my past. And I could talk about that in a whole other light now. But now I got a little bitter taste in my mouth. I don't say anything. I come back out. The guys play the first game. I go, there's no way he can leave me out. I've played every game. I'm contributing. I have to be in this. And you only get 2 games, right? You get a round robin game, and then you either win, lose, or you're in the finals, or the silver medal game, or the bronze medal game. Come out for our morning skate. We got 40-pound weight vests on. We did just a 40-minute skate in the morning. Look at the list. I'm not in the lineup again. And to my discredit, my emotion got the best of me. Snap, took the weight vest off, walked in the room, fired it at the coach, and I told him I'm done. I go, I am done with you fucking with me. I'm done with you playing God. I'm out.
How did it feel when you did that?
Awful. I felt terrible. For the moment, I felt relieved. Yeah. But as soon as those words left my mouth, I knew there was no going back. So watched the game, rode the bus back way up to Houghton, Michigan, which is, if you know Michigan and how they do the map with the hands, it's like way up, it's 2.5 hours north of Sault Ste. Marie. It was a long bus ride back. And I got back, I packed my stuff, and I left. And a month later, the coach got fired.
So what was the fallout? How did you decompress after this?
Yeah, it took a long time. I felt like I needed a fresh start. I did try and go back, but then I thought about it and I said, maybe that's not the right environment for me. So I came back and I wound up going to a Canadian university, finished school out on the East Coast in Nova Scotia, Canada. I went to a school called Acadia, played there for 2 years, played in the national finals for the Canadian universities, had some looks, got some ice time, invited to 5 NHL camps. So that was in 91. So I went to the Minnesota North Stars. They wind up moving to Dallas, but that's how old I am. I went to their camp in 92. Had a good camp, but I went in. I was undrafted because I missed my draft year because my freshman year I broke my hand, so I wasn't in the lineup. Dropped off of the face of the earth, basically in front of the scouts. Had a little bit of visibility at the end of my career. Too old to be drafted. Got invited as a free agent. Walked on and had a great camp. They didn't have me under contract. They sent me down to their IHL affiliate, which was their American League team or their International League team at the time, which was in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I had a good camp there, played a few exhibition games. Again, not under contract. It was the waiting game. So then I went down to the next level league, which they call the East Coast League, and I played there. And I played there for the next couple of years. And the problem was I got pigeonholed into a role because I was a bigger guy. I had a couple of fights in training camp against some other noted tough guys, and then there you go. And
I'm just
in
fascinated
sports,
by this.
You get pigeonholed very quickly.
Well, this isn't badminton, right? I mean, this is ice hockey. I mean, this is like an alpha male breeding ground. So it's like, I just feel like people get triggered pretty quickly. Would that be accurate? I mean, like, no one wants to back down in this environment, right? That's just.
Well, I'll tell you how quickly it got triggered. My very first pro camp, back then we used to do 2-a-days. So you do an hour and a half on ice training, just conditioning stuff. And then in the afternoon, you scrimmage. The first shift of the afternoon scrimmage of my very first pro camp, I was on the ice. Puck goes in my corner. I go to pick it up as a defenseman. I get nailed from behind. I turn around. Guy's already got his gloves off. Welcome to your first NHL pro camp. My gloves go off, and I'm in. Like I've been on the ice for like 20 seconds, and I'm already in my first fight, and I did okay. And that's where I got, I fought a guy who was a tough guy for 3 years, had already been in the league, and I held my own against him, and
so is this just a rite of passage?
My bottom lip, and I got stitched and went back out and finished the game. But yeah, now all of a sudden, who's this big kid, right?
So this is just par for the course, and this is just indoctrination.
Yeah, this is part of it, right? And part of it is a test, and part of it is the guys fighting for position. If you're a bubble player and you're not a contracted player, or you're coming in and your role is what it might be as a tough guy or a fighter, then you have to do what you got to do to stay. And so now I've been pigeonholed into this role. I didn't have a whole lot of fighting experience, but I never really backed down. You call it being an alpha sport. Everybody's tough at that level, right? And so, you certainly don't want to back down. At the very least, you want to stand in and stand your ground. And because it's part of the game of hockey, I always, I did partake in it, but as a minor hockey player, there's only so much you're going to do with a full cage and a mask on, and same college hockey doesn't allow it. So that was really my first taste. And now, as I got sent down and traded a couple of times, this became the identity of the player that they wanted. And I told myself, okay, I will do this if it's going to continue to get me paid and give me the opportunity to get back up. Well, 3-4 years go by of doing that, and you get tired of doing that, And when your role as what you thought was a skilled hockey player becomes now one where you're just getting tapped on the shoulder to go and line up and do a job, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask you, what was your love of the game of hockey at that point? Did you still love it? Playing on those ice rinks when you were a kid. I mean, obviously it's going to be different. But what was your passion level for just the actual competition?
For the first couple of years, I didn't mind it, to be honest, right? And I thought, okay, this is what's expected of me. But then it was, okay, I remember going to a coach. I was playing in the minors in Nashville before they had an NHL team. And the coach had come down he had been a player in the NHL. His name was Nick Fotillo, and he was from Staten Island. He was a boxer growing up, played in the NHL with the Rangers and Hartford at the time and Calgary. And, he liked the way I played. But I went to him one day and I said, hey, Nick, I can do more than fight. And the next morning he traded me.
Wow.
So what I was learning was it was becoming less of a sport and more of a business.
Yeah.
And I started to fall out of love with the game. And I probably wasn't as committed to the success that a lot of guys were to get to the next level, because I used that pain and I would empty it out into a bottle. It just got to the point where I did not enjoy playing anymore. And I said, okay, it's time to use this education and take it out into the real world now and see what I can do. I didn't hate the game. I hated what I allowed myself to become because of the game, if you understand. But when I walked away, I did not go to a rink or put on a pair of skates for about 3 years. I just needed a break from the game. And then I got into the corporate world, and I spent here's the ironic part, is I spent all my life trying to be known as a hockey player. And now I'm in the corporate world trying to not be known as a hockey player. I wanted to be known for what I actually was able to deliver as a salesperson or a manager or a vice president as my career went on. And so I fought the stigma. But hockey opened the doors for me, because a lot of times it was, oh, Rob was this ex-hockey player. Oh, hey, come on in. So I would use it to my advantage, but then I would try to, right? Because I wanted them to take me serious for, the product or service that I was selling or representing, or the people I was representing. And so that was, it was years of trying to unravel that Jersey personality to become the corporate person. Right?
Well, it's a stamp in your passport, and it's like, what qualities did people automatically associate it with it? I can imagine what they would be, but I'm just curious to hear from your standpoint. You're like, okay, here we go. I'm the hockey player coming in. They must think I'm A, B, and C. Did that work to your favor?
A lot of times it did open doors, as I mentioned, but then sometimes it could become a distraction, because we'd be sitting in a boardroom and people want me to tell stories from my past. And I get it there, and trust me, I was no household name. I had a cup of tea and a couple of years in the minors, and that was about as good as it got. I wasn't riding the corporate jets, that the way the guys are today. I was the guy on the bus down in the minor leagues. But I had a lot of great memories, a lot of great stories. I knew a lot of people, so I could use some of those stories to maybe lighten the conversation in the boardroom and allow people to, start to interact. So I knew that it was something that I could use to my advantage. But to your point, as you said, there were points where I'd go, oh, okay, what story am I going to tell them today? Right?
Well, you're bringing something into their lives that either they thought about, admire, or, they're living vicariously through what you're doing, right? And that's kind of cool. Yeah. So you transition from this, a very colorful and interesting experience that very few people have had, for sure, to this corporate life. So what was this corporate life like?
Yeah. Again, things just sort of went very well for me. It was sort of a trend in my life where once I committed to something, and I still hold by this truth. If I'm in, I'm all in. And it's a tagline I use in my program now. You're either all in or you're not. Right. And so if I'm all in, I'm all in. And I was a loyal employee, and, if I believed in the product, and I was a hard worker. So I brought those skills that I learned on the ice to the corporate world. And I was always hungry for more. I wanted more. So I wasn't happy just being successful at sales. I wanted to be a sales manager. So I got that. And then I had teams. And then so I helped build teams. And I tried to instill some of those characteristics that I had into the people that were on my team. Always wanted to over succeed and over deliver, but I was very careful about how I did it, because I never wanted to over promise. And I think there's a delicate balance between being open, honest, and realistic about what your goals are, and being able to deliver on those, rather than saying, hey, I'm going to go and knock this out of the park and then come in under the radar. And I think a lot of that just goes to experience, understanding who your audience is, knowing the opportunity that you have with the product or service you're offering, and being able to properly position it. I also believe that what part of my success was the ability to build relationships. Once I had an opportunity to get out in front of a person, then I knew that I would be able to shine, and my personality would eventually win that person over, and I could build that relationship. When you think about it, there's a gazillion widgets that all do the same thing, right? And this is what I learned, and I told my sales guys, is you got to be able to sell yourself and build that relationship, because there's your widget, there's our competitors, there's 100 of these things that, all do the same thing. People aren't necessarily buying the widget, they're buying you. And if you can't sell yourself, forget what the widget does or doesn't do. And I used to have young sales guys come in, and they would study the brochures, and they knew the product inside out, and they would do what I call show up and throw up, right? They hadn't even shaken the customer's hand and introduced people in the room, and they're already reciting speeds and feeds and all of the fantastic things that are going to save the customer money. And they haven't asked a single question about the customer or his business or why we're even here. And to me, those are the things that start to establish credibility and relationship. And so I was very good at that. And a lot of times I'd have meetings and I might talk about the product in the last 10 or 15 minutes, but it was building the rapport and knowing, when you walk into a room and seeing things that you can relate, that you can bring into a conversation, become people rather than a salesperson and a buyer.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And it seems like you were able to walk that tightrope and that balance that you talked about, which is selling and then overselling. People buy you.
Yeah.
That's something that seems like you have natural talent for and that you cultivated actively. Is that something that, I think a lot of people think, is this teachable, right? This is what they're asking, especially in sales. I think sales is definitely the pressure test area for that kind of skill set. Is this something that you could see and help other people cultivate through their careers?
Yeah, and I thought that I could do that. I think that's why I was able to spend 20 plus years in corporate and move up the corporate ladder into leadership and management positions. Is I was able to I could see I got very good at being able to read people and understand what their strengths and their weaknesses were, right? Because we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses. And I believe that you can be successful and not be the smartest guy in the room by surrounding yourself with smart people that can fill in the gaps. And so what I tried to do was make sure that my teams were very rounded in a sense that the different personalities were able to complement the solutions that we were offering. We had guys that were smart on the engineering side, when to bring them in. You got your lead point sales guys that could spend their day on the phone and get appointments. You got other guys that you're going to bring in and they're good at pitching a product along with a sales engineer. And then you might have somebody like myself or another senior person come in and work with them in tandem and the engineers on the close of the product. I worked in the tech space, so I was in transportation tech, mobility, mobile apps. I worked with the Sprints, Verizons, and AT&Ts for 20 plus years. I understood the way that the infrastructure of communications were laid out. So I was kind of dangerous, a little bit technically, but I always made sure that I had smarter people than me to be able to fill in the gaps when they were bringing their smart guys to the table.
Yeah, I've been in that situation before. You got to come in with your arm. You got to have your ammunition accounted and ready, right? So while you were doing this, and that's a long time, 20 years, the major phase of your life, how were you doing with the other parts of your life that were important to you? Or how did you balance the other parts of you that you were trying to cultivate or maintain, like family, hobbies, stuff like that?
It's a good question. So I wind up getting married and had 2 kids. We talk about, you use a word balance. And I don't know if I believe that there is balance, right? Because I think there's no such thing as a 50-50. And what I've learned in my 51 years is some days it's 60-40, other days it's 70-30, and you could be on either end of that scale. Up until that point, I was leading a very myopic life. It was all about me and my success and me moving forward. And, I kind of, and without sounding rude, like I'm not married anymore. I have a good relationship with my ex-wife, but she wasn't the type of person that was going to be able to push me to the next level. Mm-hmm. And she didn't really challenge me. And I think after a while, we just grew apart. And when we did, I had 2 young kids and I traveled. I pretty much jumped on a plane Monday and came home Friday. So I was gone a lot. And I focused more on me, although I was coaching my son's hockey team and, I tried to make myself as available as possible because I didn't want to be an absent father because my father was always there. And he was also a traveling salesman in the corporate world. He wasn't always there, but he was there enough. And I didn't want to be that absent dad either. And from an Italian community, and I know your community, family is so important, right? It's a base and it's a nucleus for who we are. And I wanted to make sure that I was at least offering that to my kids. And my wife and I, we just grew apart.
I think that needs to be talked about more too. Especially for men, I feel like women obviously have like very significant struggles with how they balance their career and childbearing, child rearing, and the other things they want to do. But I think men also have that because it's easy to slip into a mode where you're just going on full afterburner and you're just going see target, destroy, next target, launch missile, destroy. And I feel like that's kind of what you're describing. You're like, hey, this client, we can go get that. Here's what we got to do. Next client, let's go get that account. Let's go push.
Oh yeah, it was a whole list of them, right? Yeah, you're constantly in the sales world, and especially in corporate, and you're in sales, you're only as good as your last sale. So just like in hockey, you're only as good as your last shift, or in any sport. So the mentality of, okay, that's over, move on. That's over, move on. There was always had to be this cycle of trying to get to the next level. And I always competed. And I think that compete level that I had as an athlete is what I brought to the corporate world, because I'd look, even when I came in my first few years in sales, I'd look at the top sales guys and I go, what do I got to do to be them? And then I would try to push myself to be them. And I was always measuring myself against them. What I wasn't measuring myself was, what was it like to be the best dad? What was it like to be the best husband? And I discounted that side of my life for a number of years, which is probably why I'm not married anymore. I afforded her a lifestyle where she didn't have to work, but it also meant sacrificing me. And I remember her one time saying, well, why can't you just have a 9-to-5 job, Joe down the street? And I said, I will never have a 9-to-5 job. It's not who I am.
I was just going to ask you that exact question. I was just going to ask you, how does that feel to even say it? Because you're just like, that's so disgusting to you, isn't it? That idea.
I respect that. And I think we're all individual people, and we all have certain things that we have to bring to the table, which is what makes this world go round. My father always said, and being an Italian and my grandparents being the first generation to come over here, they were ditch diggers, right? My father always said, he goes, every world needs a ditch digger. And it doesn't matter, whether you're digging ditches or building the buildings, be the best that you can be, right? But understand where your strengths and, who you are as a person. And a lot of this didn't make sense until, I reached my mid 40s, and I just kept plowing through with that compete, and I've got to get better, and never being satisfied. And part of that was not taking the time to be present in the moment, which, there's so much to be said for that today, is just stopping, appreciating the moment, what's going on around you. Just like, this interview that you and I are having right now, old me would be seeing my phone over here lighting up, going off, and I'd want to answer it and take that and start thinking about what's happening, in the next 20 minutes or the next, it doesn't matter anymore. The most important thing is giving attention to where you're at in the moment. And if you're doing those things and you're consciously about that, the rest will take care of itself, right? But as a young person, what I learned at a later time was I was trying to prepare myself for those things and get ahead to them. And I wasn't focusing on the things that were going on right in front of me.
Yeah, it's like every once in a while you got to just roll the window down in the car and actually smell the air that the environment you're driving through. I'm still learning this. You want to hear a really weird aside story that's related to hockey?
Yeah, for sure.
Last year, I took 30 days off to become a commercial Alaskan salmon fisherman on a salmon tendering boat.
No way, that's awesome.
Yeah, because I was just like, I want to learn something different. I want to figure out where our food comes from, and that's not work I usually do. I'm not running hydraulic cranes, right, on a boat. Yeah. My neighbors, and so they had some friends coming over from Alaska, and there was like a captain on one of these boats. And so he's like, I've been a captain for 40 years. You could tell just from the way he talks. He's like a big dude. He's just a captain. You know what I mean? Like captains just look like captains. And he's just a hard charging dude, right? He's just like a hard charging dude, very smart. And his name's Greg, and he goes, we were drinking, and I was like, yeah, I'd like to go do that. And I was half joking. But you don't half joke with these guys, right? There's no such thing as a half joke. They're, like you said, they're all out. So he's like, well, if you're serious, I'm like, I'm serious. Can I film it? He goes, yeah, it's fine. 8 months later, I get a call, and he's like, you serious about that still? And I looked at I looked at Catherine, and I was just like, should I, is it irresponsible for me to go do this thing, which I want to go do? And I'm running a startup and all this stuff, right? And she goes, you're going to complain if you're up there. You're going to complain if you're down here and you're not up there. So it's like, I don't want to deal with it. Just go. I was like, yes. So yeah, it was an amazing experience because, like you said, just taking that time out to go learn something new. And this ditch digger thing reminded me of that, because probably the biggest thing I learned during this, and this is weird that I'm like 40 and it took me to this long when I was 40 to learn this. This blue collar, white collar bullshit that we do is, I think, just total BS distinction. The people up there, you know, they don't have medical degrees or whatever, but they're really, really intelligent, extremely competent. And where they fall on this spectrum is, do you take pride in your work? Like, if you really care, are meticulous, and you take pride in your work, you're in the in crowd with them. If they don't tolerate sloppiness, it's because you die up there, right? Like, sloppiness kills people. And I feel like that's the real, like, the collar thing is stupid. I feel like that's the distinction we need to. So if, like, you're a ditch digger and you're doing the best job you can do and you're meticulous about it, I feel like that's more important now. You know, like I said, again, taken me years to realize this kind of thing. But why do we do that in our society? Why do we demonize just work? People who are working and doing a good job at it.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know. I think that's a really that's a real deep dive into exploring that. You know, I don't know if I'd be able to do it any service trying to articulate it myself, but I think it's a whole mind shift that we as a society have to undergo. And I think it's something that over time, over hundreds, thousands of years, has just been a part of how we have been taught to look at things. So now I think what's happening is, you know, and I hate to use an overused term like awaken, but people are waking up and seeing that, you know what, to what you're describing, that blue collar person, the white collar person, the person that is a school teacher versus a professor, or we all are able to contribute significantly through our vision of who we want to be and understanding what our why is. And as long as we're contributing in a healthy manner, it should be respected across the board. And a lot of times I think what we do is we put each other into these pay grades based on what our income is, and we judge a person based on how much money they make. And I can tell you, you know, I walked away from mid six-figure income to do what I'm doing, and I'm not making a mid six figures anymore. Now, mind you, it's only a year, but my goal is to get. But I have become a bit of a minimalist. I had the Mercedes and the BMWs and the Audis and the big house and the pool, and I drive a pickup truck and a Harley, and I'm happy. I am happier than I've ever been. And I did the the country club thing and the suits and everything every day. I don't have to shave every day. And I couldn't tell you the last time I put on a suit. Now, it's not that I don't or I wouldn't, but I stopped caring about what people wanted me to be. And I started believing in who I want to be. And when I did that, there was this change.
What happened to get to that point? Because you seem like you were doing, I heard you talk about that before, that you left a really lucrative position. So what happened? It seems like you were kind of sailing up this ladder, as you said.
So 5 years ago, I was in a head-on motorcycle accident. Whoa. And you can't tell by looking at me, but I crushed the left side of my body. I broke all my ribs down the front, down the back, punctured my lung, ruptured my spleen, shattered my elbow, or ruptured it, came right out, shattered my scapula, and shattered my ankle, and punctured my lung. So I was in rough shape. And I was given my last rites in the hospital when I went in. And then when I got to the hospital, my kidneys failed. So there's not a whole lot we could do. I was bleeding internally. They went in right away to try to stop all of the bleeding. And it was just hang on and pray and hope that he gets through the night. And I did. And I spent about a week and a half in ICU. All told, I had 8 or 9 surgeries. And I had the doctors come and tell me that I was going to be in the hospital for at least 120 days. Now, I was the sole provider. I had just left the matrimonial home about 2 months earlier. This happened on August 22nd, 2015. And I was on my bike coming to pick up my daughter because I was coaching her little soccer team. It was a Saturday morning. Bright and sunny, warm day in Canada, and I was a block away from the house where my ex-wife, and my kids were living because I had moved out, and I got hit by a woman who was on her phone. And so in the hospital, you have a lot of time when you're laying there to think about your life. And at first I was just trying to absorb what had happened to me. And I had a nurse come to me after I got out of ICU, and she said, you know, like, I'm a big guy. At the time of my accident, I was about 240. I'm 6'3". And she said, we've seen people with less injuries than you not survive. You've been given a second chance at life. Don't waste it.
The nurse said
And I
this to
didn't
you?
know what that meant. The nurse said this to me. Yeah. And that saying always stuck with me. And I didn't really realize how much that meant to me at that time. But the longer I spent in the hospital, and as I got out of ICU and I started my recovery, I owned that person that I used to be. I owned all of those, the finger pointing. I owned all of the damage that I had done through my myopic relationships. And I swore that the next half of my life was going to be used in purpose and not for me.
Why did all this, I mean, don't get me wrong, I know the accident's traumatic and that obviously it's, like you said, you have a lot of time to think, but I feel like there's probably, and I've seen it myself clinically, I've seen people who, after they have a heart attack or something, they kind of go right back to what they were doing before, whether it's a form of denial or difficulty changing or accepting things. What is it about this experience for you versus any other trauma patient where you like, no, I'm going to make a change? I'm not going to go just harder and drive the motorcycle faster or take another route next time. What was it that, was something eating at you before that this was just the event?
For me, it was a realization that I couldn't continue to live the life the way I was. I wasn't happy with myself. I was driving cars and living in houses and wearing clothes that I did not feel comfortable in. And I did it because I had this image of who I thought people wanted me to be. And I had done that as a hockey player, and I'd done that as a corporate person. And it was this opportunity to say, I now want to actually be who I am. And I am not going to let somebody tell me what I should wear or how I should look or how I should act. And I did, it took me 2 years to build I lost about 50 pounds. And,
Jeez.
At the time I could put my hand all around, right around my bicep and touch my fingers when I got out of the hospital. Okay. So I looked nothing like I do right now. So it was a commitment to health. I was not in a healthy place. I was drinking a lot. I was pushing myself too hard. My kids had no idea who I was because I was never home. And, my marriage had failed. And it's never one person, but I know that a lot of it was my own doing. And whether we were meant to be together or not, it's irrelevant. It's the point that I now had an opportunity. I was given a second chance at life, and I wanted to do something that I could now look back on and leave a legacy. I want to leave the world a better place than how I was brought into it. And so that's part of my mission. So when I look back at my life and the moments in my life where I wish that there was somebody that does what I do, that I could talk to and share these experiences with and guide them through that process. I don't believe in the word teach. I believe in guide, because my approach is by asking questions. I think we all instinctively know what drives us, but we don't know how to get it out of us. And so I really want to be a servant leader to the young athletes and young pros in the world, because I think that it's something that's missing. We're so driven by money and success. And these guys today get paid so much money, but at some point we know that sport is going to end. The game you're playing, and it's just a game, is going to end. And it could end because of a motorcycle accident. It could end because, your career is just at the point where you can no longer be of value. And that's a hard thing for people to understand. I know a lot of guys that had to exit a game, not because of an injury, but because they weren't valuable anymore. And when you're a pro athlete, at any level, there's a point where you're just a commodity, and if you're not bringing value, you're no good to them. And what does that do to your mentality as a person? And I know a lot of guys that woke up the day after they were told they're not of value anymore, and they look around and they go, "What the fuck do I do now?"
Yeah, they're not just
and
stats on the playing card.
They don't have an understanding.
Yeah,
they're just big deal. And guess what? People, just like they did me, hey, that's great. Tell me the story. Okay, now what value can you bring with this product, this service? How can you help me, right? And if you don't understand who you are and what your why is, and you don't have a vision of how you can be gracious and be of service, then what's your purpose in the world? And so that's my perspective. So was it an aha moment? I think it was a combination of reflection and I need to be a better person. And how do you do that? You can never go wrong being gracious and helping others. And if you live your life every day thinking about those things, the rest will fall into place, right? And there's some neuroscience and woo-woo stuff we could talk about that I've taught myself that goes along with that. And there's science that supports all of that. But I didn't understand what any of that meant before. And now that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. Who can I have a conversation with today? Who can I help? Who can I talk to? Who can I help? How can I add value to somebody else's life? That's what I get up for. And I've got a great relationship with my kids and my ex-wife. We probably talk more now than we did when we were married. And I've got another person in my life, and I'm thankful for that. I'm in a great place. Does my bank account reflect where it was when I wasn't happy? Well, here's the balance. Do you want to live a happy, fulfilled life, or do you want to have a big bank account?
Can you have both?
I don't know. I think you can, and I think you can. I didn't know how to handle it back then, though. Not having that experience or that knowledge, I think, is something that the guys that do have the big bank now, if I can open up their mind to how to have both and plan for the future and be a better person and be grateful for the opportunities that you're given and not be in a position of comparing yourself to others, but just do the best you can do every day. I think that I'm seeing it with the young athletes that are 16, 17, 18-year-old. They're going, wow, you're opening my mind to things. And I'm seeing performance on the field, in the rink, at home. I'm reading books. I'm thinking about things that I never would think about normally. And that's a cool thing to see because you're planting a seed in a young individual. You can cover it up. And at some point, that little sprout's going to come up and you're going to know that you are responsible for nurturing and watering that, right? That's pretty neat.
So you've come across, looks like, a set of processes, and that's what you're involved in full time now. Can you talk more about, so what is it that you spend most of your time now on? Because it seems like you found this, crafted it, learned about it from the existing literature and other examples, and you've created your own kind of proprietary stuff. Can you talk about what that is?
Sure. You look at it, it's not rocket science. You talk about a person's journey, right? So when I look back on my journey, I can tell you all of the places and the points where they were learning opportunities that I could have applied just a different choice. And I say this in my teachings now is we live on an axis between B and D. B is birth, D is death, and we are C, and C is a choice. And every day we're presented with hundreds of choices, and we have a choice. Do I want to accept the call to do a podcast with Ravi, or do I not? Do I, want to walk outside and pick that garbage up off the street, or let somebody else do it? Do I leave the bathroom and wipe the piss stains off the toilet for the next guy, or just leave it for somebody else? Like, these are all choices, and everything that you choose to do, you can either leave your environment in a better place or as it was. And so this is the way that I look at things now. And do I have an opportunity to learn and grow every day? And can I share some of that with somebody who's willing to listen? So those are the fundamentals. And then what I do, without getting into a really deep dive on it, but I help young athletes realize, as I stated, this sport you're playing isn't forever. If you're lucky, and we'll use just hockey as an example, there's 1.4 million kids in North America that play minor hockey. 0.025% will get paid to play. Never mind making a career, will get paid to play. 0.025%. So it's ridiculous. And when you look at, if you look at all the top pro sports, and I'll throw hockey in as the fourth one, football, baseball, basketball, you guys down in the US love all that stuff. And I'm going to throw hockey in because I'm Canadian. The average professional lifespan is 4.85 years. 4.85 years. Take out the highs and the lows, right? Do a little Malcolm Gladwell there.
That's crazy.
So let's say you go to college and you're 21 and you turn pro at 21 or 22. By the time you're 27, you're done. Now what? You're still a young man. You got your whole life ahead of you. Maybe you were advised on what to do with your money. Most guys, a big percentage of pros, wind up finding themselves in bankruptcy or in a very futile state within 2 years after exiting their game. But if we can help instill a mind shift in the way that they approach their sport and life at a younger age to prepare them to be the best that they can be every day in their sport, and know that, okay, this is over, I'm okay with that because I'm ready for my next chapter and the next chapter and the next chapter. A lot of times we get so focused on the finish line that we forget about enjoying the process. And so this is also part of my program. I help young guys understand that they have to, first of all, enjoy being in uncomfortable positions, because the only place you're going to grow is through discomfort, and enjoy the journey. Enjoy that, because I have what's called the finish line syndrome. Is we focus on this finish line, we forget about all the little things that we have accomplished to get to that finish line. Once you get to that finish line, guess what? There's another finish line and another one. There is no end to this. Life is this journey of learning and experiences. And you may hit a goal, but there's no finish line. To me, the finish line is when they hammer the nail into the box and they say goodnight and throw some dirt on me. And even then, I think our souls are infinite. That's my beliefs. So what are you doing with your life while you're here? And how are you impacting others? Is it positive? And what is your legacy going to be? So I help create those, I help athletes understand and think about those kind of things. So, I have them do a life evaluation and we define their core values. Those are the first 2 or 3 meetings before we even talk about sports and how to get better. It's doing an internal dive into who they are as a person. And then from there, we'll be able to work on those things.
If I want to just explore the values piece, because this keeps coming up. This is a common theme amongst high-performing people, and it seems initially to not be related, even though it obviously is. What do you find, especially when you're talking to the younger athletes, what do you find is the mismatch there? What are the common themes that seem to keep popping up when you're dealing with them and training their mindset with this, that they either aren't aware that they have these values, or they've never really done this exercise before? Is it uncomfortable for them?
Yes, it is uncomfortable. And I'll be honest, where it starts is it starts with their family and their home life. And it's also a reflection of the coaches that are coaching them, right? We get so focused on win. And I'm not a big advocate of the participant trophy, because I think that there are lessons to be learned and in winning, but it's the approach on how you teach kids and guide them about what winning means, right? And it has to come from within. It's not somebody cracking a whip and telling you what to do. You have to want to win. Internally, you have to have that burning fire that says, I want to be better than the guy across from me. Not because the coach told me to, but because I want to. And when you figure out that, then you become invincible, right? And so the disconnect is, for me, is and it's a difficult one, because you're disqualifying, or you're going against the way that their parents talk to them. And parents sometimes are the worst advisors of young athletes, because they're trying to live vicariously through their kids. Hockey parents, I don't know any others. Hockey parents are off. They're out of their rocker. They're off their rockers, most of them. They're screaming and yelling at their kids. Like when I was coaching my son, and even when I wasn't coaching, I couldn't be near the other parents. Because of what I knew about the game. Yeah, I'd go stand by myself. They thought I was a loner, and I'm okay with that. I'd go stand on the other side behind the glass, because I just couldn't listen to it, and it was so detracting from what they were trying to achieve on the ice. And then you got parents that are talking over the coaches, and it was very destructive. So it starts at that level. It starts with the associations, the parents, the coaches, how we talk to our kids, because they're still little sponges, up until they're, young men. Their frontal cortex, their frontal lobe doesn't develop till they're 21, 22. So they don't always comprehend things. So for me, those fundamentals are getting the kids to understand who they are and define what their values are. Understand, I teach them a little bit about mindset in my world includes your past, your history, your current physiology, and that those things combined become your philosophy, what you believe. And we know that the things that we believe are not always true, but we're conditioned to those things based on an emotion that's tied to an experience from our past that our reticular activating system calls forward when we encounter that again. And now it's okay to question it. And I use an example. A 2-year-old boy, little boy or girl walks up to pet a dog because it's cute and it looks fluffy. And the dog bites them. Well, they might grow up with this fear of dogs. But we know as adults who haven't been bitten, all dogs aren't bad. But that experience in that individual says dogs are bad. Why? Because our brain tells us, I pet a dog, the dog bit me, it hurt, and now all of a sudden our primal instincts kick in and go, well, we need to go into protective mode, right? So I'll go deep like that with examples that the kids could understand and have them challenge themselves and ask themselves questions. Well, why do I believe this? And why am I playing this game? Am I playing because dad wants me to play? Or am I playing because I really enjoy playing, right? And you can see it in the kids. The ones that want to be there, they don't need a whole lot of encouragement. You got to drag a kid to practice, and I get sometimes at 6 o'clock in the morning is not ideal, but most of the time you'll see in their effort and the way they talk and what they do. So if you can help bring that out in them, I think that you're able to start to mold a foundation for them that they can build on through sport and life.
What else what are the next steps after that? So after you do this values, after you bank their values, really make them self-examine, because that's an amazing exercise and super powerful and super scary to do alone. It's probably not possible to do it alone, just because you need that objective measure. But where do you go from there?
Well, if I'm working one-on-one, it's a little different than in a group environment. So in a one-on-one scenario, really I'll ask a lot of questions. What are you feeling this week? What went on at school? How did you feel in practice? I try to incorporate things like journaling and writing to me have become a big part of being able to contextualize your thoughts. And there's something about putting your thoughts on paper and looking at them and either adding or devaluing what they mean to you, depending on how they're affecting your mental state. So journaling is really good. Understanding, having them write down things they can control and can't control. And then once they can see these things that they can't control and how they compound in their mind and how that compounded negative thought relates to actions and words, and then put that into perspective, then they start to understand that side of it, right? Then we'll incorporate different breathing techniques. I'll talk to them about how to remain calm and centered, right? We'll use an example from Viktor Frankl, who was the neuroscientist who survived the Holocaust. And he talks about that space between stimulus and reaction, and living in that calm and being able to, like, a perfect example, I'm sure you watch the Super Bowl. You watch a guy like Tom Brady, he's being attacked from all over the place. And you look at him and it's just like he's in total control. And he may be one of the greatest athletes for his ability to control the moment. And I tell the young athletes is, control your emotion, control the moment. And trust me, I was one of the first to overreact, so I can speak from experience. And I can also speak to what it does now, because I can take a clearer look at things. And I'll describe it kind of like a hurricane. If you ever look on a map of when a hurricane is coming up through, either the coast or whatever, and you see this fiery bright red where everything on the outside is being stimulated, but then in the middle there's this calm blue center. Right? So if you can be that calm blue center in the middle of a hurricane, then you can choose the reaction to the stimulus around you.
How important?
You do that by breathing.
In addition to the breathing and this kind of mental exploration, though, I'm really interested to know about the physical training aspect, only because You've been used to doing that since you were a teenager in a very methodical, systematic way. Physical training, weightlifting, cardio, all that stuff that we know is important for everybody.
Hate cardio, just for the record.
No, I know, me too, right? Like, yeah, it amazes me. I'm a 6'1" Indian guy. Like, I'm a larger of someone from South Asian descent. It's like a little bit of a bigger person, and that's because I'm from the Midwest, so we just eat a lot, right? It's like this makes a difference. Nutrition makes a difference in your size, So about the bigger thing, like when I get my pulmonary function testing done, they always go, "You have abnormally small lungs, Dr. Kumar." I'm like, "No, I don't. Just your machine wasn't standardized to people my height, so your readings are, it's like your sample size is wrong." What's funny is it's like this is like the problem, right? This is one of the problems in all of life right now for people living in the Western societies. It's this issue of chronic disease, health, mindset. So this kind of coaching that you're doing, I'm internally thinking, how do we apply this not just to athletes? How do we apply this approach to mindset and physicality and make it someone's priority? How do we expand this to a majority of our population? I can't think of a human being that doesn't benefit from this kind of the exercises that you've been talking about.
Yeah, no, listen, if I could figure that out and we can bottle it, we can make a whole lot of money. But I think what it comes down to is that it's that C. That we live on, that axis between B and D. They're choices. We all have choices, right? And so what you're talking about is creating a mind shift in a population that right now, and Canada's part of that, North America, we're one of the most unhealthiest populations. It's because we have become accustomed to this immediate need for satisfaction, right? Whether it's through fast food, and that's a whole big discussion about eating habits and how we push ourselves to work and what these expectations are. And sometimes it takes a life-threatening disease or incident to have that aha moment, or a doctor looking at you and say, "You know what, if you continue to put that cheeseburger in your mouth, you're going to not see your daughter graduate." And sometimes that type of reality is what is needed, and I think by having conversations like this and the ones that are happening on Clubhouse and being able to expose more people to the options that they have, healthier options, the way that they think, and an understanding of that your thoughts become your words, become your actions. Reading a simple book like The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, simple, those kind of things will start to open up opportunities for people to say, "I want to live a healthier life, I want to be a better person, and I want to leave a legacy for the people that come behind me." And I don't know if the population thinks that way, right? And it could be because of, the environment they're brought up in. So that's a much bigger, deeper discussion. But I think we're getting to a point where we're starting to realize that we are going to have to make changes if we want to survive as a society, to be good to each other, to be a good person. And what does that mean? I could take it in so many different directions. I don't know if there's just a singular answer for something like that. That's a whole other podcast.
What kind of results have you been seeing with the athletes that you've been coaching this way?
Yeah, no. So I'm seeing an increase in performance, in self-confidence, in their ability to communicate both at home and with coaches. We're seeing an increase in their grades. We're seeing efficiencies in time management. There's a whole bunch of self-esteem issues that are being brought out. Kids are becoming now more open and vulnerable about the things that are going on up in here, and they're willing to talk about them rather than to let them fester. We know that doesn't do any good. We're seeing an increase just when you couple nutrition and physical training with the mindset. To me, those are the three pillars. We're starting to create a more healthier individual who hopefully will take that to the next generation and the next generation and influence the people around them. That's the best thing I think that we can do, right? Is try and positively influence the people around us.
Yeah. And do you feel like these kind of techniques need to just be instilled at a more institutional level? I mean, we're not formally taught this at schools. Like you mentioned, the coaches and parents are all well-intentioned, but don't necessarily know or trained how to engage in tactics like this to help kids through these moments. Do you feel like we need to left shift this and go more upstream and put this formally into the education?
I would. I think that there's something that needs to be done at the school level. I think that, outside of private schools, the public school system needs a complete overhaul. I see it. I've got 2 teenagers. So, and COVID has been an eye opener because now I can see what they're working on because they're sitting in front of their screens and their tablets all day. And I'm watching teachers just kind of go through the motion. And I get it. It's a learning experience for everybody. They're not used to teaching to a screen and to kids that they can't control. But even then, it's the curriculum. Are we teaching them, or are the kids actually learning? And if you go back and if you read Jim Quick's book on Limitless, he talks about that a lot, about learning to learn. I think we teach kids how to memorize, but we're not actually teaching them to learn. Those are 2 very different things. And then if you can put thought process, the way they think and the way they articulate and the way that they speak, and then the effort and the action that goes in behind that, to me, that's something that should automatically be brought into the curriculum. And if you can do that, now you're starting to create a major shift in the next wave of generations.
Rob, what impact have you seen COVID, the isolation that's come along with it, the stress of adapting new models of working and learning? How has that impacted your business and what you're working now with Mindset Body Bank?
Well, look, I believe in looking for a silver lining, and I think that what it has done is it has woken up people. I think what it's done from a cultural perspective is to realize that perhaps this environment of having everybody in one place isn't always necessarily the most efficient or effective way. I think that there are still ways that we can leverage the technology we have to continue to produce positive results in the workforce. I think that from my particular position, what it's allowed me to do is get creative on the programs that I'm able to offer. And I can now duplicate myself more frequently than having to travel to a rink or a field. And, you think about the travel time and then the time spent there and then the follow-up. Don't get me wrong. I'm still all about in person because there's a bunch of intangibles that you can get. But if you can garner the attention over Zoom, and that's part of the downside of this is kids are zoomed out by the time I get to them sometimes in the late afternoons and evenings. So you're dealing with that, but we've had to all become creative in how we go about working. Look at you and I probably 20 years ago would not even be having this conversation if it wasn't for technology. And so I think it's how we administer it.
Well, and it's going forward. It's interesting to see you talk about where you are now. So you're still riding bikes though.
I am still riding. Sorry.
As a fellow motorcyclist, I can, and who's gotten in an accident. I've dropped the bike, so I know what it's like a little bit. Really roughed up my hands. The one day I always wear armor, I always wear everything, except the one day I didn't wear gloves, and of course that's the day it's going to happen. Right? Anyway, but you're still riding now. So
I'm guessing you ride one of those fast bikes.
No, I actually, you know what? No, you say that. I actually don't like those bikes. I don't think they're comfortable. I'm much more of I have a Triumph Speed Triple. So it's a cool bike. Cool. It's a very different kind of bike. But I'm the kind of guy, I want a bike where I can just sit there and like ride from SoCal to Montana. Like a Victory or like a Harley or something that's just a little bit bigger. Triumph makes a big cruiser like that. It's like that big 2.3 liter. It's insane, right? So I like that kind of thing. It's more fun. So what is life like now?
Life is interesting. I wake up. I've become a glutton to routine and schedule. I think what it does for me is it keeps me focused on the things that I have to do. I am become a very humbled, grateful person. I give time to my parents, which are aging. I make sure that my kids get my time when appropriately every day. Staying home, I have a passion for cooking, so I love to cook. So I always make sure that there's healthy food and fresh food, and dad's cooking, and probably spoil them a little bit to that point, but it's okay because I find cooking a release for me. So when I walk away from the computer and I go into the kitchen, a lot of times my girlfriend and my kids might say, "Hey, can I help you?" And I'm like, "No, you guys just sit there. I enjoy doing this. It's a relaxation for me." I've become my father. I used to say to my dad, "God, why do you get up so early in the morning?" And I've become that guy. So now I wake up at sometime between 4:30 and 5 o'clock without an alarm. I go through a little visualization. I do about 10 or 15 minutes of meditation. I put my feet on the floor, and my old body needs a little stretch before I start my day. So, I work the kinks out, and then I make a coffee and I do some reading. I have a process before I just jump into my work world. Whereas before I used to jump out of bed and race to an airport and get on the plane and work on the plane. And so I actually structure time for myself every morning. And I know it may sound selfish, but by doing that first thing in the morning, I'm able to give more of myself to the people that need me later, if that makes sense. I go to the gym. I've become a major fitness freak, if you will. I'm obsessed with biohacking and understanding the brain and what I can do to my body. And I want to live till like I'm 120 if I can.
And what do you think about all the technologies coming out, like things, not just the wearables and tracking devices, but things like home genomics tests, microbiome, the ability to get your own lab results? How do you feel about that data, all that stuff that used to be hidden behind a prescription pad or a computer in a doctor's office?
Yeah, so I think, it's like anything else. I guess it depends on the hands that it falls into. For me, I'm very intrigued by it. So I am able to take a neutral look at those things and decipher, is it a positive or a negative for me? I can't make that decision for somebody else. I can see how it could create panic in the community if you don't know what you're doing or how to approach it. But I think that their data is a fantastic thing, and information is very valuable when you know what to do with it. And so if you are willing to do the research and understand what the markers mean and how you can effectively change them positively, and know that what's good for you may not be good for me, and filter that one size doesn't fit all, and that there is no blue pill or red pill that's going to cure me, but I'm going to be able to subjectively look at this data and apply it to my person, then I think it's great. The challenge is getting everybody to think that way and use it properly.
So Rob, what is your major project now? Is your focus mostly professionally on evolving your coaching techniques and mindset, body, fitness? What do you need to go 100x? What's your next step?
My next step is, what I call my BHAG, my big, hairy, aggressive goal one day is to have a consulting or an institute, a big physical facility. And I would love to incorporate not only the mindset training, but physical fitness. I'd like the idea of what you were talking about, some of the genome testing, and explore some biohacking. And I'd like to be able to take athletes or individuals in there and help walk them through, this process of understanding who they are, what their body is, what they can do with their body, how to extend their life, and educate them on how to do that and become non-reliant on some of the unhealthy practices that are out there. And to me, that would be the ultimate, and be able to work with young athletes and young minds and watch them make something of themselves. That's the big long-term goal.
That's a great goal, and that makes a lot of sense. And I really like that you're, it's not just the people our age, right, that you really want to work with. It's the people in that very formative section of their lives where, like you said, they lack guidance. When you first were talking earlier in the conversation about breaking your hand, and I was like, I would have broken my hand on myself if I could see myself at 18, 19, right? I'd be like, punch that kid in the face and be like, listen, you got, these things you learn, and when you get older, you just think, well, that was a preventable situation. I'm never sure if it's something that whether the interception would have been important or not. I can never tell. It's like if I could have taken the time, the DeLorean back and said, hey, you're going to do this, I don't know if I would have been in a place to even accept it. I don't know. That's like one of the big unknowns. Like how much of the information would have helped me turn right when I turned left versus, no, I just needed to go through and step on those mines. That's one of those big unknowns in life, right?
I think it's a great question. And I thought about that, right? Because I'm here today sitting talking to you because of all those experiences, right?
Yeah.
And I've got a 17-year-old son. And trust me, there was an example of somebody who doesn't listen to anything that I say. It's this kid. And I say, how can I affect so many other young athletes? And you live under my roof. But it's not that he's not listening. And this is where, as a parent, I have to step back and say, you know what? I can tell you and I can advise you and I can give you the ability to make that decision, but you still have to make the decision. And if you choose A or B, you got to live with that. And I have to tell myself, let him experience it, let them experience it, because it's those experiences that are going to shape us. And, to your point, would you have listened? I probably wouldn't have either. But there were points, and I'm not trying to deflect those things from happening. But what I would do were those points where I was really down and in a dark place and wishing I had somebody to talk to. That's when I would want to appear to my younger self and say, you know what? It's okay. You're going to make it. This is how you can pull yourself out of it. Because there were some dark times.
That day when you had to go back on the bus and you weren't in the lineup.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just those are the kind of decisions that could have changed, one way or another, or at least given you a better perception of yourself to make a better decision in that moment and learn to react from here, not from your heart sometimes.
This has been really helpful to understand what you're doing and the impact you're making in the segment of the population that you're really focusing on right now. It's been amazing. And I'm always fascinated by people who are athletes because at some level, I feel like you're ahead of the rest of us because you've sharpened a set of knives from a very early age that you can go rely on now, whereas I think a lot of us need to get after that, kind of later in our life. It's funny, culturally, Indian people who are in the United States, actually in India too, we really need to hone in on this a little more. I think it's the thing is all the stuff in the old Indian mythology always ends up being right. The stuff that you ignore your parents when they tell you to do stuff, like my mom's like, you should do yoga and meditation and all this stuff. And you're like, yeah, whatever. I'm not going to stretch and breathe. Okay. That's, when you're like 12 or 13 or 14, your Indian mom tells you this, you're like, that's all BS, whatever. But it ends up they were right. So they were onto something back then. And so part of that is exercise.
There's so many positive practices that come out of the old Eastern cultures, the Indian culture and Eastern medicine. So,
well, this has been an amazing conversation. And thanks for letting me in on your world and your journey, because it is one that is inspiring. How can people find you and what you're doing right now?
Yeah. So if you just do a Google search for Mindset Body Bank, that's the name of my website. It's my Instagram. I don't do a lot on Twitter, and you can find me there. Those are the best places to reach out to my content. I got an ebook that I wrote that you can get on my website. I came up with my 21 secrets for creating some momentum for 2021. Still got lots of time to implement that. You can also get that on my website. And I try and put out content weekly, daily and weekly on my Instagram. And I have a podcast also called Mindset Body Bank.
That's great, Rob. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time and helping to educate me and everyone else listening so we can be involved in this journey of improvement.
Ravi, I am flattered and I appreciate the opportunity to spread the word. I wish you continued success.